The House will please come to order. Welcome, members, to the 8th day of the 2022 budget session of the 66th Wyoming Legislature. You'll please join Reverend Veit for our opening prayer.
Good morning. I thought I'd offer to you a collect or prayer for guidance today. Let us pray. Almighty God, we commend to your gracious care and keeping all the women and men of this House of Representatives and all of those who are part of the process. Defend them day by day with your heavenly grace. Strengthen them in their trials and temptations. Give them courage and grant them a sense of your abiding presence as they continue with the business before them. For it's in your name that we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Veit. We appreciate you. Stay warm, and we'll see you tomorrow. All right, members, it looks like we have all our committees back, so let's have roll call.
Convening roll for the 8th day, Wednesday, February 23rd, 2022. Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, excused, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flittner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermueller, excused, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood,
Here.
Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Worf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zwanitzer, Mr. Speaker, Nicholas, Romero Martinez, excused. Obermueller,
Here.
Mr. Speaker, 58 present, 2 excused.
Thank you very much. General Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of February 22nd, 2022 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Harrelson and Provenza.
Thank you very much. So members, we're going to introduce a stack of Senate files so the committees can keep working. There'll be 27, so you can start studying your budget amendments and preparing for that. After we do this, we're going to take up third reading, and there'll be potentially a motion to lay back a bill or two. And then we'll go to second reading, with the budget bill being the last bill on second reading. Last bill. So we'll introduce some Senate files, then we'll go to third reading, and then second reading, run through the second reading, and the budget bill will be the last bill. My understanding is we are at 51 amendments. There's one more we're waiting on. And as a reminder, the budget amendments will be printed and available at the back of the room as soon as we're trying to get the whole package was approved, and now it's being printed, so they will be delivered. We'll take a short break for people to get those gathered and bring them. If you can stand to wait till you get the printed copies that come from the copy machine and don't have to run them through the printer over here, that poor printer is about to give it up. So give the printer a break if you can. So with that order of business of Senate files on first reading, first Senate file is number 13.
Senate File 13, sponsored by Transportation.
First reading of the bill.
Temporary delegation of parental authority.
Senate File 13 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Senate File 25.
Senate File 25, sponsored by Judiciary.
First reading of the bill.
District Judge Positions Authorization.
Senate File 25 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Senate File 29.
Senate File 29, sponsored by Judiciary.
First reading of the bill.
Liability for Governmental Health Care Providers Amendment.
Senate File 29 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Senate File 40.
Senate File 40, sponsored by Transportation.
First reading of the bill.
Criminal Record Dissemination Military Department.
Senate File 40 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. Senate File 57.
Senate File 57, sponsored by Appropriations.
Senate File 50, first reading of the bill.
Chancery Court Vacancy Amendments.
Senate File 57 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Senate File 58.
Senate File 58, sponsored by Appropriations.
First reading of the bill.
Wyoming Council for Women's Issues Workforce Services.
Senate File 58 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Next, Senate File 59.
Senate File 59, sponsored by Appropriations.
First reading of the bill.
Game and Fish Fund Investments.
Senate File 59 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Next, Senate File 73.
Senate File 73, sponsored by Management Audit.
First reading of the bill.
Codifying the Institutional Land Fund.
Senate File 73 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Senate File 98.
Senate File 98, sponsored by Appropriations.
First reading of the bill.
Federal Emergency COVID-19 Relief Funding and Limitations.
Senate File 98 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Senate File 19.
Senate File 19, sponsored by Revenue.
First reading of the bill.
County Optional Property Tax Refund Program.
Senate File 19 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. Senate File 34.
Senate File 34, sponsored by Revenue.
First reading of the bill.
Inheritance Tax Fees Repeal.
Senate File 34 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. Senate File 38.
Senate File 38, sponsored by Revenue.
First reading of the bill.
Monthly ad valorem tax revisions.
Senate File 38 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. Senate File 31.
Senate File 31, sponsored by Education.
First reading of the bill.
Absenteeism and truancy.
Senate File 31 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. Senate File 32.
Senate File 32, sponsored by Education.
First reading of the bill.
K-3 Reading Assessment and Intervention Program.
Senate File 32 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. Senate File 8.
Senate File 8, sponsored by Agriculture.
First reading of the bill.
Weed and Pest Reorganization.
Senate File 8 is referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. Senate File 9.
Senate File 9, sponsored by Agriculture.
First reading of the bill.
Revenue Bonds for Agriculture Endeavors.
Senate File 9 is referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. Senate File 10.
Senate File 10, sponsored by Agriculture.
First reading of the bill.
Predator Control.
Senate File 10 is referred to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. Next bill, Senate File 6.
Senate File 6, sponsored by Travel.
First reading of the bill.
Aquatic invasive species inspection enforcement.
Senate File 6 is referred to Committee Number 6, Travel. Next Senate File 27.
Senate File 27, sponsored by Judiciary.
First reading of the bill.
Dissolution of County Boards Authority.
Senate File 27 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next Senate File 49.
Senate File 49, sponsored by Management Audit.
First reading of the bill.
Repeal of specified state boards and commissions.
Senate File 49 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next Senate File 74.
Senate File 74, sponsored by Corporations.
First reading of the bill.
Water and Sewer District Elections Amendments.
Senate File 74 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next Senate File 75.
Senate File 75, sponsored by Corporations.
First reading of the bill.
Deferred annuities, minimum non-forfeiture.
Senate File 75 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Senate File 3.
Senate File 3, sponsored by Transportation.
First reading of the bill.
Radioactive Materials Transport Fee.
Senate File 3 is referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. Next Senate File 18.
Senate File 18, sponsored by Transportation.
First reading of the bill.
County Road Maintenance Fund Amendments.
Senate File 18 is referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. Senate File 35.
Senate File 35, sponsored by Minerals.
First reading of the bill.
Electric Vehicle Charging Stations Regulation Exemption.
Senate File 35 is referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. Senate File 45.
Senate File 45, sponsored by Transportation.
First reading of the bill.
Military Department Annual Report.
Senate File 45 is referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. Senate File 46.
Senate File 46, sponsored by Minerals.
First reading of the bill.
Solid Waste Cease and Transfer Program Funding.
Senate File 46 is referred to Committee Number 9, Minerals. So members, all the committees got bills except for Committee Number 10. So Madam Chairman, we're still waiting. Actually, my drawer is empty. There are no bills, Senate files available. So as soon as we get bills, we'll continue to roll them out to you as appropriate. Reports from standing committees.
House Bill 105, sponsored by Representative Hallinan. Severance Tax Reduction Coal, an act relating to taxation and revenue. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 105, Severance Tax Reduction Coal, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do not pass. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Senate File 39, sponsored by Appropriations. Firemen's Pension Plan Benefits, an act relating to firemen pensions. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 39, Firemen's Pension Plan Benefits. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
All right, members, copies are still being run. So, and I just got the final budget amendment. I think we're at 52, if I'm not mistaken. 52 is at least the number on this amendment, 52. And I'll give you the order. There's been some additions, so the order will change just a little bit. Before we get there, I'll make sure you have the order. It doesn't affect it very early in the order. It's later in the order. So members, we're at that order of business of bills on third reading and final passage. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Rule 7-3, I move to lay back one day House Joint Resolution 5 and House Joint Resolution 6.
Without objection, House Joint Resolution 5 and 6 are laid back one day. That leaves us House Bill 37. House Bill 37 have been read through us. No, we are third. Reading clerk, please read the bill.
House Bill 37, sponsored by Judiciary. Juvenile Justice Data Reporting, an act relating to criminal history records being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
House Bill 37, having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Please, Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn excused. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller.
Aye.
O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood.
Aye.
Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yen. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Fortner. Aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 55 aye, 4 no, 1 excused.
House Bill 37, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 37 has passed the House. Chairman Eklund, would you like a privilege of the floor? I see some folks that might come from your neighborhood. Please introduce them.
Mr. Speaker, privilege.
Please proceed.
It's my pleasure to introduce some of my favorite constituents. Up in the South Gallery, we have the fourth graders from Burns Elementary. One of the classes, their teacher is Mrs. Patterson, Christina Patterson. She and her family have been longtime friends. My daughter's competed with her. In case you kids didn't know, your teacher's a real athlete. And I have a bit of trivia, and I know that we're kind of hard pressed, but Christina's great-great-great-great-grandfather, William Henry Harrison, served in the 28th, 29th, and 30th legislature. And their pictures are around the corner, and hopefully the kids get to see them, but that was 1945, 47, and 49 is when he was there. Now, the interesting thing as we research this, there are 2 William Henry Harrisons up there. Oh, I'm not close enough to the mic. There are 2 William Henry Harrisons up there. So it became confusing, and I figured it out real quick because there were 2 different men when I was looking at the pictures. But both of them are directly and indirectly related to our 9th president. So thank you for coming and visiting us. Mr. Speaker, these are the Bronx.
Very good. We're so glad you're here today. I hope the roads are safe and you return home safely. So thank you for joining us. Any other privileges of the floor? Any other privileges of the floor? All right, members, we're At that order of business of bills on second reading, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Rule 7-3, I move to lay back one day House Bill 3.
Without objection, House Bill 3 is laid back one day. House Bill 3 is laid back one day. And members, as I stated yesterday, House Bill 1 will be the last bill we take up on third reading, so we're going to proceed through the rest of the bills. I do have a couple bills with amendments, so those folks that have amendments, please be ready to bring your amendment. First bill for our consider on second reading is House Bill 2. Reading clerk.
House Bill 2, sponsored by Select Water, disposition of water rights, an act relating to subdivision of land and water rights.
House Bill 2, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objections, so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 6.
House Bill 6, sponsored by Select Waters, ARPA funds for water and wastewater projects, an act relating to water and wastewater projects.
We do have an amendment. Representative Sherwood.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman. I bring you a second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 6 and ask for your favorable consideration. This amendment would prioritize 3 water projects from our Chief Executive's letter number 17 that have already been approved by SLIB, but have experienced cost increases due to the negative economic impacts from the pandemic. 2 of these projects are in House District 5 and the other one is in House District 59. The total gap for these projects is $1.5 million. However, this amendment is not adding to the $95 million request. We are simply asking for your consideration that upon a receipt of a complete application, the agency reviewing these grants prioritize its evaluation of these projects for eligibility. They are each well below the $7.5 million project threshold. Ensuring these 3 water projects receive this consideration decreases the burden on the small communities that have already been through an extensive vetting and application process. Getting them in the queue quickly also lessens the likelihood of further cost increases. And with that, I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much, Representative Sherwood. Any member for their first time? Representative West, members for their first time. Vice Chair Duncan, for your first time, amendment number 2, House Bill 6.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The important thing to remember here is all of these have been approved. Many of them have already started. And so currently the way it's wording and the way it's my understanding is they'd have to go back through the application process and start over. They're already in the process of some of them, but they had supply chain issues and different reasons. And so this is really important to our rural communities to be able to get these things finished that we're already well approved and vetted and in the process. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you. Representative Simpson, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, as I explained this program to you yesterday, once the rules are established in early fall, the agency will invite everyone, every community to participate, send their applications in. Well, although good intentions by these representatives to try to prioritize their projects, the bottom line is this is exactly what we did not want in the Select Water Committee. Let's put everyone on the same fairness of submitting their applications, being ranked according to the value of the project. I'm sure these 3 projects are very valuable and will rise to the top. But the idea that we would prioritize 3 communities above everyone else when we haven't even received the applications is inappropriate, and I encourage a no vote.
Thank you. Representative O'Hearn, first time, then it'll be Larson Lloyd, and then Larson Dan. Representative O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, these business-ready community grants, like the good representative from Goshen County mentioned, they were already all approved. There's a lot of work that goes through from the Wyoming WBC and SLIB to make these go, and some of them have been on the books for more than 3 years. Some of them are already started. And when I say started, all of them have been started, but not, some of them have been working on. There's a lot of staff input on these, and we're just asking that they be put to the top of the list because we've already spent money on all 10 of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Larson Lloyd.
So in the conversations, folks, that we had when we was doing the agency's budget and we come to the BRC program, that conversation would cause me to agree with the comments that we've heard thus far, that all of these projects were approved and they went through the process, but they were approved at a rate. And so then when they come with this exception request to fund these, we ask some specific questions. With this gap, has there been any effort to go and use the state revolving funds in the clean water or drinking water to cover this gap? We've not heard back that any of that has been done thus far. It doesn't have to go back through the whole process. And so we're saying skip some of this due diligence that we would expect anybody else to do if they come up short or that they're finding some gaps here. And we're just going to bring them right to the top of the priority list above everybody else. And I'm sure that they'll qualify, but I don't think that we should prioritize them. And I still think that we should expect that they would use existing programs that might also be out there to do that. So I'd encourage you to vote against this amendment.
Thank you. Representative Larson. Dan.
Mr. Chair, or Speaker, thank you. I just would encourage a no vote also. Let's go through the process. These will probably be right at the top. They have 3 agencies looking at them. Wyoming Water Development will be the main agency, but they'll be at the top. Let's go through the process. We could all stand up and ask for a project, but let's let it go through. Vote no, please.
Any other member for the first time? First time. First time. Seeing none. Second time. Second time before the sponsor. Second time before the sponsor. Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to remind the body that these 3 projects started their application process in 2018 and 2019. So they have been thoroughly vetted at the local level by their community through these grant processes with the Business Council and SLIB. They have done their due diligence, and in at least one case, they have brought their overages, their gap, down. So they have done their due diligence. And I would just ask you to be empathetic and understanding that a lot of work goes into these applications, and to honor that work that they have already put in. Thank you.
All right, thank you, members. So we're voting. I didn't see you there, so I apologize, Representative Duncan. I let the bringer of the amendment go final, and so my apologies if I did not see you through this screen. My apologies. So, members, we're voting on second reading, Amendment Number 1 to House Bill 6. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The amendment has not been adopted. House Bill 6 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 16.
House Bill 16, sponsored by Transportation, Military Assistance Trust Fund, authorized uses, an act relating to defense forces and affairs.
House Bill 16 having read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next bill, House Bill 17.
House Bill 17, sponsored by Transportation, Veterans Facilities Surrounded by Grazing, an act relating to state lands.
House Bill 17 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next bill, House 47.
House Bill 47, sponsored by Minerals, Local Impact Assistance Payments, an act relating to impact assistance payments.
House Bill 47 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next bill, 49.
House Bill 49, sponsored by Corporations, Election Reporting Requirements, an act relating to elections.
House Bill 49 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is ordered. Next bill, House Bill 52.
House Bill 52, sponsored by Corporations, Timeline to Prepare and Process Absentee Ballots, an act relating to elections.
Thank you. Members, there is a corrected copy of this amendment. So please, if you're looking online, refresh your page because there's a corrected copy that I got about 5 minutes ago. So please make sure we're looking at a corrected copy of House Second Reading Amendment Number 2 to House Bill 52. We just pause for just a moment, because the way the numbering appears is there should be 2 amendments to this right now, and I want to ensure that I have taken them in the proper order. So we'll just pause for a moment so the chief clerk and the reading clerk can ensure our records are accurate. Members, just so you note, this is, at least the corrected copy I have says Second Reading Amendment Number 2, which would denote that there's a Second Reading Amendment Number 1. And I want to ensure that we have that understood before we proceed. So I think we have confirmed there is a First Amendment, Representative Nyman has that, and a Second Amendment that's also Representative Nyman as a prime sponsor. So we're going to get both of them up here, and I apologize for the delay, but I do not have a copy of the amendment in my hands, and it's not in the record, so we need to get it. So we'll get that, and then members, please go online to see the amendments. As I mentioned already, number 2 has a corrected copy. All right, members, we're at that order of business of House Bill 52 on second reading. We do have two amendments. First one is second reading amendment number 1. Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I bring you, Mr. Speaker, I move House Bill 52, second reading amendment number 1, and would ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, what we've done here is we've gone back into the penalties portion of this bill, and I've changed on page 1, line 3, before penalty, we will insert felony. Then moving on to page 1, line 9, we will delete 2226.112A and insert 2226.101A. And through on down onto page 4, lines 6 through 12, delete entirely and insert 2226.101, felony offenses generally. The following acts in connection with or related to the election process or an election, if knowingly and willfully commit, are felony offenses punishable by not more than 5 years imprisonment in the state penitentiary or a fine of not more than $10,000 or both. The reasoning we're doing this and the thought behind this is, and I just had discussion with the clerks and they were supportive of this, is that because of all of the issues that we're dealing with election integrity and the problems that we see, it was a lot of feeling out there that we want to put some real teeth in this, that if somebody does take it upon themselves to transmit or to share information in regards to potentially numbers or whatever, that there is a real, tangible, a very effective deterrent out there for anybody that would do that. And I think it boils down to the idea that we want to try to make this as transparent as possible that this is not something that you mess with in Wyoming, is early balloting, the opportunity for our clerks to be able to do a good job. And if you're out there messing around and you're offering information early, then you need to be punished for it. And then ultimately, you need to lose your ability to be able to vote. And so that's what this whole point is. I would stand for any questions. We want to put some real teeth in this so that we have a real caution on folks out there. If you're working with the balloting process in the elections, that you keep this information and you do not divulge anything at any time. Thank you. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any member for the first time? Member for the first time, second reading, amendment number 1. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I didn't talk with the clerks and didn't get any information from them, but I did just want the body to know, I think I'm actually okay with the amendment. 22-26-101 is the felony offenses in our law already, and there is 10 subsections, things including unlawful opening of a ballot box, unlawful opening of a voting machine, unlawful possession of a key, things that I would say are similar in nature to the unlawful dissemination of information on who's ahead in a race, perhaps. So it goes pretty easily, actually, into existing law. The question before you is, should going and sharing information about who might be ahead in a race or looking to see who voted early, is that on the same par as other felonies in our statute of the unlawful opening of a ballot box? I would say it probably is. And so I'm going to be voting yes on the amendment. I do know historically this body is reluctant to add felonies in the statute, but I think this one could work.
Thank you. Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd really caution on this. I want you to remember, who is it that's volunteering to be election judges and who's in the room? They are typically retirees. They have a hard time as it is to get volunteers to do this job. But now they're going to have the potential of a felony facing with them. This is too much. And the clerks that I visited with, this wasn't necessary. We already have penalties in our statutes. We already have jail time threatened to them. It's very difficult to get volunteers, and it's very difficult to have people participate as it is. If people are worried and different parties are worried, then volunteer to watch the process. It's transparent. Anyone can be in the room and watch it. So I highly caution the body about a felony for these retirees, mainly, being a part of the process.
Thank you. Representative Henderson, then Yin, then Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with the previous two speakers. In the last 22 years, since the turn of the century, I think that I have my information correct, we've had 4 convictions for voter fraud in Wyoming. And I don't think we could ever be too careful. But I agree that we need to make sure we have the environment that does promote participation, not get in the way of it. We need to be accurate, for sure. We need to make sure it's done right. And so my question really comes down to, just making sure that we don't go too far, but make sure we do enforce it, and that everyone is knowledgeable and understands their piece of it. So how do we do that?
Thank you. Representative Yin, for your first time, we're on second reading, amendment number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So just a reminder for the body, the people that are going to be in the room is the person opening the ballot and putting in the machine, and a person from each of the political parties that want to observe. They can see each other. And, if someone is hand counting each ballot and staring at the ballot, trying to look under when they're sticking in the machine, I think that's pretty noticeable. I don't think having a felony as a deterrent to have people even participate at all in the observation process is a good idea. So I don't think this felony is necessary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Gray, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really urge an aye vote on this amendment. This conversation is very concerning to me. The fact that the clerks seem to be opposed to having a felony here. I mean, these are really serious violations, and tampering with these elections, which we heard yesterday couldn't happen, wasn't going to happen. If it's not going to happen, what's the problem with putting in a serious felony violation for if there's tampering or other mischief with these ballots? And I guess my question here is, what's the problem? I mean, why on earth would we be opposed to this? There are felonies. There's a potential for felonies when we get in vehicles every day. When we go outside and walk the sidewalk, somebody can commit a felony in theory, but people still do it. So, I mean, the idea that this is a deterrent from somebody working the polls, the fact that there would be a clear felony for these violations, which there are already some of these felonies already present in statute, I just don't think that's a reason to not secure this process further. So please vote aye on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Olson. Any other members for the first time, please be coming to the mic. Chairman Olson. Chairman Olson, do you wish to speak on this or not? Any other member for their first time? Chairman Olson.
Mr. Speaker, sorry, I was a little confused. Are we on the corrected copy?
Chairman, we are on House second reading number 1. Number 2 is the corrected copy, so we are on the
No,
previous.
Mr. Speaker, I do not wish to speak.
All right, thank you. Any other member for the first time? Representative Provenza for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick question. I believe it costs roughly $70,000 to house senior folks in our prison. And I'm wondering if this is going to add a fiscal note from DOC on this as well.
Thank you very much. Any other member for their first time? Representative Knapp for your first time.
On and for the amendment. You know, we're looking for the right volunteers. If you do nothing, you're fine. If you cheat, steal, destroy, or redirect an election, it's a crime. And whether you're 21 or 75, it should have some accountability to it, and I think this gives it teeth. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? First time. Members were on second reading amendment number 1, House Bill 52. First time, first time. Seeing none, second time. Second time. Second time to the sponsor, Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate the discussion, but personally, in this situation, I don't see us seeing a lot of elderly being committed to the prison system based on the fact that they are willing to divulge information. I think that what we're looking at here is just the reality that if you do decide to pass information in regards to elections, that there are real consequences for that. We shouldn't have to be really concerned about the folks that are there doing it because they are doing it because genuinely they are honest generally. But for anybody that would decide that it is a good idea to divulge information, there needs to be a bite out there on this that would be a prohibitive thought that, listen, I'm not going to offer this information because I could potentially be charged with a felony if convicted. So that is the reason behind this. We just want to make sure that there is enough pressure on this to make sure that the folks stay honest. Not everybody's going to take that choice, but I think if you do decide to be dishonest, that you should have to pay the consequences. I would support the amendment and appreciate your support on it as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. So members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 1, House Bill 52. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The amendment is adopted. Next amendment for our consideration is second reading number 2, Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to remove Second Amendment number 2, and we'll consider it from third reading.
Thank you. Second reading number 2, the corrected copy is withdrawn. House Bill 52, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Chairman Eklund, privilege of the floor, please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, another privilege. House members, we have more Bronx in the room here. Would the other fourth grade class from Burns Elementary stand up? Their teacher is Mr. Brandon Anderson, and I won't go through any more history on the very long and interconnected streets of Wyoming and the U.S. But anyway, welcome to the House of Representatives. I hope you have a good day.
Well, welcome, Burns fourth graders. We're so glad you're here. Glad you traveled safely. We wish you safe travels home and hope you learn a lot while you're here. Just for the members, when I was walking up, I was in the rotunda and I was getting ready to come up to the chamber about 9:45. I stopped and visited with some of these young folks, and they already had done a lot of history, knew a lot about this capital. They could name off all the four sisters and which one was which. They had lots of things. So their teachers did a lot of preparation to get them so they could come here and actually appreciate much of what we have here and what we do here. So I thank the teachers for that, and I thank the kids for all the work they're doing here today. So welcome. And apparently we do have a former Burns Bronc in the house. So, it can turn out all right. See, look what you have to look forward to, kids. You get to sit at the front of the class someday. Front of the class and be called chief. You'll be the chief. All right, members, we're at that order of business. Continuing with bills on second reading. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 65.
House Bill 65, sponsored by Representative Bear. County tax protest filing date and act relating to ad valorem taxation.
House Bill 65, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, so ordered. House Bill 86.
House Bill 86, sponsored by Blockchain, genetic data privacy amendments and act relating to genetic data privacy.
House Bill 86, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, so ordered. House Bill 87.
House Bill 87, sponsored by Blockchain, insurance investments amendments and act relating to insurance.
House Bill 87, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. Next bill, House Joint Resolution 1.
House Joint Resolution 1, sponsored by Judiciary, Supreme Court Justices and District Judges Retirement. A joint resolution proposing to amend the Wyoming Constitution by amending the retirement age requirements for Wyoming Supreme Court Justices and District Court Justices.
House Joint Resolution 1, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, is so ordered. So members, just to recall that these joint resolutions, which we'll have two that were laid back to today, up tomorrow, and then this one, those will all require a 2/3 vote of the members elected, So keep that in mind. All right, members, so we're going to stand at ease for precisely until 11 o'clock. And before that's 10 minutes. The budget amendments, the printed budget amendments from our collated budget amendments are in the back. And we will verify the order of them when we come back together. So instead of people getting up and coming back and going back, get yourselves organized, get your computers organized, get your paperwork organized, and we will reconvene. We'll reconvene at 11 o'clock to take up House Bill 1, second reading amendment to the budget. Thank you very much. We are in standing at ease. Yes, you will have to walk all the way to the back of the room to get your amendments. Representative McGuire. The House will please come to order. So members, we have come to that place. We have arrived. Second reading on the budget. This is where we get two opportunities to impact the state's budget solely as a House of Representatives. And before we take up that work, let's just one last time thank our Appropriations Committee before we undo as much as we can. So join me in thanking them. All right, game on. We're at that order of business of bills. Oh, first of all, I need to make some announcements. Members, you received the packet of bills, physical bills. There are 4 additions that were not printed into the packet, so they'll actually be separate in a separate pile, maybe in the back now, Chief Clerk? Are they in the? Oh, they may be the last ones in your packet, but I'll read them off to you. So they are 51, 52, and 53, and 54. So they're numerical order, but they do not go in numerical order in the amendment process. So if you look at your first column, I believe you still all have the same one as I. Your first column has House Second Reading Amendment number 23. After that, insert Second Reading Amendment 51, and then after that, 2053. So there'll be 2 new amendments at the bottom of that. So it'll go 2023, 2051, 2053. Both of those new amendments require roll call votes, and that is what the star or asterisk or whatever that symbol is means. They require a roll call vote per House rules. So the asterisk is not a yes or a no, it is a roll call. You choose how you want to vote. So 51 and 53 go after 2023. And then on the top of your second column, you should have 2024, 2025, and then next we'll go 2052. 2052 followed by 2026. So the top of the column will be 2024, 2025, 2052, 2026. That, at least by my notes, does not require a roll call. And then the bottom of the column, of the second column, 2052 has an asterisk, and follow that with 2054 that will also have the star, requiring a roll call vote. Does anybody have any questions about any of those amendments or where they are inserted? And the last amendment is just arrived, and Miss Patty will just pass it out, bring it around the room so people aren't getting up and down. But let's be clear, folks. Depending on where you are in the pool, we may not need it from between 6 and 10 o'clock tonight. All right, I'll repeat them all. 2023, bottom of the first column, followed by 2051, 2053. Top of the second column, after 2025 goes 2052, and the bottom of the second column is 2054. 2054. So I want to ensure everyone has access to their amendments, they understand the order of the amendments, they understand what the asterisk means. And there will be bonus points for anybody who withdraws an amendment. You will get a 5-minute advantage on the pool. Oh, I don't know how that's going to work. Discussion, any questions? Because once we start going, folks, as you know, we keep cranking. Our intention will be go till noon. We have committee meetings at noon, and then we'll come back at 2 o'clock. So that's the majority floater that makes a different motion. All right, we're at that order of business. The bill's on second reading. First bill for our consideration, House Bill number 1.
House Bill 1, sponsored by Appropriations. General Government Appropriations 2. An act to make appropriations for the fiscal biennium commencing July 1st, 2022 and ending June 30th, 2024.
Seeing there's no amendments, House Bill 2, having been read. Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong script. We do have amendments. House Bill 2, second reading amendment number 1, House Bill 1, second reading number 1, Chairman Nicholas. Recall, members, this is second reading rules. Amendment, bringer of the amendment, first time, second time, bringer closes out. I'd also like you to follow the script on your desk. I move second reading amendment number 1, I move second, so move the amendments and then explain your amendment. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, I talked a little bit about this earlier when we went through the budget. And just to refresh your memories, so currently the Treasurer's Office is about 3 or 4 months behind in their accounting. And the problem it's actually getting worse, so that we were not able to get a CAFRS report from the State Auditor's agency this year because they haven't provided the complete books and the accounting to bring them up to date to do it. They're estimating that may happen in May or June. And it's causing considerable different issues, but they're working their best to catch it up. And they've retained an accounting firm, and they've supplied the Capital Finance Committee with a itinerary of the work that they're going to get done with this accounting firm over the next 4 or 5 or 6 months in order to automate and update their accounting processes. I already explained how we are adding more accountants to their office so that they can get this work done and basically get control of the back office. And all that's is consistent with what the recommendations of the Investment Funds Committee, who conducted an audit last year of their processes and made these recommendations. But it all happens a lot slower than, and it takes longer than you forecast, just because that's the nature of the beast. And so we're working with them, but what this does, this just asks them to report back on their, it's like a multi-step process. And so we're just asking that they report on their accounting updates, on how the automation is going. They're working with Broadridge, which is a worldwide company who is updating their systems, and we want to make sure that they're on time, up to date, and if they're having any problems, if they need any help. So basically, this is an appropriations bill that's on both sides of the body, just so that we can keep track of this accounting process. So after your favorable consideration.
Thank you. Any member for their first time, remember, I just caution you not to mention names of businesses as you provide your testimony, or names of individuals that may be involved in this process by name. So I'll caution you on that. Any discussion on first reading amendment 1? Second reading amendment number 1. Discussion. Seeing none, members, we're voting on second reading amendment number 1. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Amendment is adopted. Next amendment, number 2, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 1 and ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, as I was reading through this bill, I kind of got a little struck by the state treasurer deal and the discussion that was occurring. So I've tried to clean this up a little bit and tried to make this a little more palatable for myself and hopefully for the rest of the body as well. It seems to me like what we're trying to do is put a little bit of a stopgap here and have somebody in between the IFC and the state treasurer's office. And we want this to be not driven by politics. We want this to be a certain situation that this person would be able to make recommendations as they see fit without having to worry about losing their job and or pleasing a political, a winner of a political race. That's not what we're trying to do here. So what I've tried to do, and you're going to see an amendment after this one as well that does a little bit more than what mine does. What I'm trying to do here is make this new position that we're creating here a position in which the state treasurer would have the authority to hire this person, but it would be very similar in what we do with a gubernatorial appointment, where it's through the advice and the consent of the Senate. And so this gives that little bit of a buffer to where we have that understanding that this person won an election and they have constitutional authority. And what I heard yesterday was, well, the constitutional authority says the treasurer gets its power from us. We write the laws that do that. Well, it also says that about the state superintendent and the state auditor I don't necessarily buy that that's all that they get. So what we have to do here is we really have to make sure that we're understanding that this is not a situation in which the state land and investment board should just be able to pick and choose this. Underneath no other circumstances do we allow the state loan and investment board to make a political appointee determination in another executive branch office. So what I've tried to do is say, hey, the state treasurer can make this determination, but then it has to go to the Senate for advice and confirmation. Then after that, it's also up to the treasurer if they so allow or if they so choose to fire this employee, then it has to be an affirmative vote of at least 50% of the state loan and investment boards, or 3/5. So that's what this amendment does, is it is trying to find a little bit more palatable way than having the state loan and investment board be the end-all be-all for this particular position that the state treasurer is going to have in his office. I don't see us in any other shape or certain circumstances allowing the state loan and investment board to have that type of hiring or firing authority in any other executive. I don't want to try to subvert the power of the elected official that garnered more votes than I did. So I tried to draft this as best I could. I still think it's not perfect, but I certainly think, in my opinion, this is a little bit better than the way that we were looking at doing it by just giving everything to the state treasurer. So I'd ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Representative Brown. Representative Larson Lloyd, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the good presenter of this amendment, and I talked yesterday, and I thought he had some valid points on what we do in the budget bill and some things of that nature. But here's the problem with the amendment that I see is if you look at line 14 on page 14, line 23, we asked the Investment Funds Committee, not the SLIB board, to make the recommendation. So what we've got is we've got this Investment Funds Committee over here in charge of investing our state funds. Do they want a chief operations officer and a chief executive officer? What should that be? So in CapFin, when we heard testimony from the Investments Committee, they said we would, kind of depends, we could be a chief financial officer or the other. And we thought if they're the ones in charge of running that component, they ought to make a recommendation on what best would suit their structure. And we do away with that, and we say that the treasurer would recommend what it is that they need. And I think that that's a mistake. And so really based on that, I would ask you to resist this amendment.
Thank you. Representative Stith, first time.
Mr. Speaker, just have a question for the bringer of the amendment. This provides a role for the other body down the hall to have advice and consent over a subordinate agency position. Is there any other agency where we do that, where you have someone, a chief operating officer inside an agency, being subject to the advice and consent of the other body? And the other question is also with respect to the change on page 14, line 23, if you're making a recommendation to the other body down the hall, it seems that doesn't that just naturally politicize the process when sort of our whole goal is to not have the operations of this agency politicized?
Thank you. Any other member, first time? First time. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a really a great amendment, and I think the state treasurer, talking to him, he's definitely going to consult with the IFC on what position to create and who to look at. I mean, I don't think you have to put that in the amendment. We have another version that keeps that in there, and I'm sure you could clean it up on third reading to have the IFC recommend somebody. The state treasurer has no issue with that, and I don't think there is any issue with that. The issue here is having the SLIB select the person and then have the person serve at the pleasure of the SLIB. And that's what this amendment fixes. It's what the next amendment fixes. And I think overall what we need to be getting at. So let's vote this up. If they want to put the IFC recommendation back in third reading, I think that would be fine. But let's just get it done and resolve this, I think, somewhat of a misunderstanding in this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Zwaniter, then it'll be Representative Heiner. Chairman Zwaniter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To answer the question from a couple speakers ago, there are some subordinate cabinet agency positions throughout that the Senate does confirm in a dual role. State Medicaid agent comes to mind. I think there are a couple others. I just can't quite figure out on lines 14 through 16, the state treasurer shall retain termination authority over the position subject to a majority vote in favor of that termination by slip. So if I think about this both ways, the state treasurer hires somebody, doesn't like the person, they can't get rid of them unless SLIB agrees to it. And inversely, if the other 4 members of the SLIB board want to, say, get rid of the person for any reason, they can't do that unless the state treasurer agrees. I can't figure out how the sentence is supposed to work, and I would assume it would work both ways. And if it does, I don't like it. But I need some more clarification on how that org chart, once again, in this world is going to work.
Thank you. Representative Heiner, for your first time, second reading amendment number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I like this amendment because it clears up one of the problems that I have in the original bill. In the original bill, it says the Investment Fund Committee will interview applicants and recommend the candidate. Now, I've got horror stories that I can tell you. When I tried doing this very thing in business, I had a supervisor leave, and I thought, for cohesiveness, I'll let this group of people, employees, choose their next boss. Sounds like a good way to increase morale and keep them a tight-knit group. What ended up is it was a popularity contest, and they chose someone to be their new boss that didn't have the skills necessary to succeed. So I thought, well, we can deal with that. We'll send him off to training. We'll train him to be a good boss. It didn't happen. And I had a very, very difficult time thereafter trying to replace that individual with somebody that had the skills necessary to lead a group of individuals. So I like this amendment, and I recommend we vote aye for this amendment.
Thank you. Any other member first time? Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, ladies and gentlemen. So I think we need to look at the bigger picture, because you recall House Bill 244 was passed, and over the course of the interim, the Investment Funds Committee conducted an in-depth review with the assistance of the folks that are retained by the executive branch to advise on the accounting, and they worked over months and months of work. And if you go to the Treasurer website, I believe that it's about an 84-page report, but that's available for everyone to look at. But one of the recommendations of that report is that we take the investment team that's currently in the Treasurer's office, and we make it an independent entity. And you heard me talk about that last year when we had House Bill 244 on the floor. The concept is what we really want to take politics out of investing. So I would concur with the bringer of this amendment, but that's the exact goal of what we're trying to do here. This actually brings politics back into it, and that's part, and thus this particular language. The part of why we have the IFC, not a part, because we have the IFC, is so that we can get we've got folks who are in the investment world, that do this professionally for a living, who are nationally renowned and worldly renowned. I mean, they're that good caliber of people who are volunteering their time to do this. And they came to us and say, okay, actually we went to them. We said, how would you do this? What is the most productive way that we can invest our dollars, get the biggest bang for our buck, and stabilize our investment policies over time so that we can have the greatest return for the state of Wyoming? Well, one of the things they talked about was the independence of our investment team. Every time that you have a change of position in the state treasurer, you can have volatility because of different philosophies on what they do and what they don't. In addition to that, To date, we've never had a state treasurer who was a qualified investment person, which means that that person has to rely on the advice of the people who he has below him. That's because they're not qualified. I mean, they're politics. They're politicians, just like we are. But the one thing what you don't want to have is a layperson who is controlling $28 billion of investments. And that's part of the reason why the investment of our $28 billion is in SLIB. That's the State Land and Investment Board. And the treasurer is a member of that. But the ultimate responsibility lies with the board, with that board. And so that's the 5 electeds. And so they are the ultimate folks who, you know, when the chips fall, it lands on them. And if we do a bad job, those are the folks that are number 1 in firing line. If they do a good job, they're raised up. So since 1972, when we created the 1% and the permanent trust funds, we've moved the overall operations under the treasurer's office, and that's all statutory. None of that is constitutional. All the powers of investing dollars like this was created by the legislature. And so what have other states done? Other states who have these extra funds are moving regularly to a independent investment body so that politics doesn't play a part of how these dollars are invested. So what this language does, this is kind of the first step that was put together at the recommendation of the experts to try to, number 1, to have SLIB have some say-so in the overall investments of oversight of the investment body, and make it more independent and less political. So that's really all we're trying to do here. And it's, to me, it's, you know, there's nothing personal about this. It's just the way, it's the best practices, and it's what we should do, as recommended by the experts. So I would suggest to you that this is the way was crafted was done deliberately and intentionally to make it less political and get the biggest bang for our buck for our investment. So on and against the amendment.
Members are on first time, second reading, amendment number 2, House Bill 1. Further members, Representative Hendrickson for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I certainly understand the last speaker and what the intent is, and I applaud that. But when we turn the page, I want to make sure that we don't do anything to undermine the office that's affected, whether it's this office or others. You know, over the years, we have good and we have not so good. And I think there's a lot of people voted for the people who are in office. And so in any fiduciary situation, we need to make sure that we have an arm's length, I think. And so I think this amendment helps us consider a step in the right direction. I haven't made my final decision, but I think there's a lot of other good things going on in terms of bringing these millions back into our state to better manage them. But we're held hostage to the conditions of the market. We can't control that. So I don't think this is about politics. I think it's about the office. And is this going to support the office and make it better, or is this maybe have the unintended consequence of undermining it?
Thank you. Any other member first time? First time. First time, second time. Second time, Representative Larson Lloyd, second time.
Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to respond just a little bit to my good friend from Siskiyou, because he brings up a good point. If you have subordinates that select somebody that may be a friend that isn't qualified and you can't make him a boss, the flip side of that we also have a concern about, and we see oft times, is you have a political person that gets involved in cronyism and selects somebody to be over a position that certainly isn't qualified. So there's kind of a fair argument on both sides that conversation, but still encourage you to defeat this amendment.
Any other member for their second time to the sponsor, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to say that we're starting off strong here. I think we're going on about 11 or 12 minutes, so we're going to be here for a while tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, I do appreciate all the questions and I do appreciate the debate. The first thing that I want to say is I really don't like that we're actually having this discussion in a budget. If this is really the discussion that we want to have on how this appointment is made and the position that we're going to create and all that, let's see a bill. Let's see some discussion on this and actually have a true full-fledged discussion. That being said, I don't have a problem with actually putting this position in and giving the authority to what we need to do here. But Article 4, Section 12 of the Constitution says the powers and duties of the Secretary of State, State Auditor, Treasurer, and Superintendent of Public Instruction shall be as prescribed by law. So we have 4 other offices that we prescribe by law. The idea that this is supposedly going to be insulated with the IFC making the recommendation and making that less political, I really want to make sure we all understand how the IFC is formed. The IFC is formed by SLIB nominees, people that come from the State Land Investment Board. They're appointed to this board. So this idea that we're trying to make this less political is just who's going to have their name up there with the top 5 elected officials. This doesn't insulate it anymore. What my amendment does, the good chairman of corporations asked a good question and exactly why I worded it the way I did. This position is now insulated. This position is insulated in a way that says, hey, look, the state treasurer who's in charge of our funds, we've prescribed that by law, has the authority to hire, but they've got to make sure that this is an appropriate appointment, just like our gubernatorial appointments are. Then, if there's 4 of the members that say, hey, look, we don't like this person, we really don't think they're doing a good job. If the treasurer thinks they do, they're insulated. The person who won the election for a statewide office for our investments is here. They're making that determination. Inversely, just as I just stated, if the state treasurer feels like they're not doing a good job, but the other 4 or 3 do, they can vote to keep that person in this position. They're insulated from the political nature of what they're trying to do. I really did try to craft this in a way that if we're going to pass a position and we're going to put something like this into a 2-year budget, which again, I really don't think we should be doing this in the budget, but if that's what we're going to be doing, let's insulate the position and let's have a decent way of making sure that we're not politicizing this policy. So with that, I'd ask for an aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Members, we're voting on second reading, Amendment number 2, House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Chair is in doubt. All those in favor, please rise. Those folks online, either use your physical hands or your virtual hands. Thank you. Those opposed? There's 2 online. Okay. So the vote is 28 for, 30 against. The motion has not been adopted. Next amendment is second reading number 3, Representative Gray.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is like my Super Bowl here, second reading on the budget. I move second reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 1 and ask for favorable consideration. So this is a variation on the amendment we just discussed, but I think it does clean up a couple of the issues involved in the drafting of the amendment, and it takes a little bit of a different approach. So let's first talk a little bit about this from 30,000 feet up. It is very important that we retain the overall risk profile that our state is going to go with. That overall decision needs to be retained with the elected member, the state treasurer. And the IFC can recommend, and that's great. I think that's the role for the IFC. But this is a very important decision, this risk profile. And I can tell you the idea that the experts know everything, I went to school with a lot of these experts, okay, that now are in New York City making these recommendations. I can tell you the first week I was in school was the 2008 financial crisis. It's unbelievable. It's the first week I was in financial school. And to see the looks on those grad students' faces when the market fell apart, the CDO market, I will never forget it. And it taught me a real lesson in September 2008 about these so-called experts, which is that their risk profile is much outside what most people should be. And certainly if the elected state treasurer runs on that and that's what the people want, I think that that's something he should do. But the ultimate decision on what that risk profile should be with the elected member. It should not be with these so-called experts, because I can tell you, I went to school with a lot of these folks, they are experts in a way, but they're not perfect. And their life is driven by risk in a way that I'm not sure should entirely be the way we drive the state's investments. It's different from a yield seeker that is, day trading or whatever. It's just a different deal. So the treasurer should have purview over this new position. Now, I'm not opposed to the concept of creating it. In fact, we added into the budget, in this amendment, we add in the potential for a CFO. So it could be a CEO, a CFO, or a COO that the IFC could recommend. We're adding in the potential for a CFO. And the IFC would be able to pick candidates and make that recommendation, but it would be the state treasurer who would ultimately be making the selection, not the SLIB board. And the thing about having the SLIB board do this, it's a very odd argument, because how are the SLIB board members going to have more expertise than the state treasurer? They say, well, we want to put this in the hands of the experts, but then they say, oh, we're going to let the other 4 statewide electeds who don't handle the investments at all make the decision. So that argument doesn't really make sense to me. This should be retained with the state treasurer, the ability to make this decision, and I ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member first time? First time on the amendment. Representative Bear, I see moving to the mic. I'll go there, and then I'll go Chairman Nicholas. Representative Bear.
First for a second.
Thank you. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So just to address a few of those comments to help kind of fill in the gaps, the IFC is not a politically charged entity. In fact, it's appointed by a double blind, if you will. So you select 5 candidates who are professional investor type qualified folks, and then the process is that they will come up with names, and also the IFC can come up with names, or the treasurer's office or whomever can come up with names of whoever's qualified to do it, and they submit those names to this second tier of professionals, and they pick a final 3 candidates or 2 candidates who then gets selected by the governor to fill that position. And so we established this 3-step process precisely to get rid of the politics and make sure that we have the most qualified person to serve on the IFC, and that's what that board is. So it's important to understand that we're developing step by step this process of independence and non-political involvement. So, but who sets the asset allocation for the $28 billion investments? Guess what? We did it last year. The legislature does it. We amended it last year when we went to a whole fund concept with Senate File 119. So then we take that asset allocation, and typically what you make in your money, 90% of all the gains and losses, whether you're making 5% or not 14%, is determined by asset allocation. So we established that asset allocation and we did it in part with the approval of SLIB and because we worked with them as we were putting those bills together. And then once we pass it, then it goes back to SLIB, and SLIB then is the administrator. It's the corporate board that oversees on whether or not we're meeting those asset allocations. So they meet quarterly, they evaluate all the investments of the investment team and make sure that we're in the asset allocations. And we allow a margin, they allow a margin of about 2.5%, depending on which allocation it is. But you have to go back and forth. So that's the process of how this works. If you have a CEO, so a chief executive officer, who has total control right beneath the treasurer, that means that person reports directly to the treasurer, and the treasurer can say, I want you to do this and run this company like this. Well, right now, so the question is, do you have a CEO, a COO? That's just a chief operating officer, because one has control over your chief investment advisor. If you have a chief operating officer, they're kind of dual folks, and so they both report to the treasurer's office. And so the mechanism that has been recommended by IFC is not a CEO, it's a COO. Because if you have a CEO, that means that person can direct the investment person. And a lot of times your CEO is not an investment person. He's more of an administrator, because he knows how the computer software works. He knows how to work with the large accounting firms. And so they have different expertise. So with this particular amendment, we already have a chief investment officer, so it really kind of doesn't make sense the way it's crafted, and it's not what we have today. But that's the process, and that's the way it's going to be recommended, and that we hope to move forward with. So on and against.
Thank you, Representative Knapp, then Representative Nyman.
First for a second.
Thank you, Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand in support of this amendment. I like the idea that we're going to have a group of people that are going to pick the best of the best. Forward these candidates to the state treasurer who was picked by the best of the best, and that's the people of the state of Wyoming, to make the decision on how we go forward with our financial needs and our financial decisions. I know there's some discussion out there about when you have somebody, then how do you get rid of them? But I mean, we have an attorney general right now that's appointed by the governor. We can't remove that person. I mean, if you're looking at it from that standpoint, I like this amendment because it says that the folks that we trust to make these decisions, the forward names that are going to be highly qualified adults, individuals that are going to be able to really manage our finances, are going to have the opportunity to be selected by the person that people chose. I think that's a good idea, and I think I would support this, and I would do.
Thank you. Representative Hallinan, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder how many of you have ever heard of the Black Swan. That's an event that comes up and surprises all the experts. And that can happen no matter who the experts are. So the Black Swan event is always a possibility. I would say that also in respect of the denigration of politics, I think politics is a necessary component of our government. The treasurer has to have the ability to balance current needs and make future needs, make allowances for future needs. So I think the politics that the treasurer provides, I think it can be a good thing. So with that in mind, I support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other member first time? We are on first time. Well, Chairman Zwanitzer, then Chairman Harshman.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. And just another org chart question. So from what I understand right now, how it works is we have a chief investment officer who works for the state treasurer. The chief investment officer is also on the investment funds committee, which would be hiring the person. But then I'm still a little confused. Depending on which way the investment funds committee goes, the position could be a CEO, which would hypothetically be over the chief investment officer, so that person's hiring their boss, or it could be a chief operations officer, which in my world of organizational development would be kind of lateral and equal. So I already have questions how that works, depending on how the investment funds committee, who's made up of different people, gets to choose whether the person is their supervisor or their lateral. Going back to this amendment, then you have, apparently the state treasurer would still get to decide whether that position is a chief executive, which would oversee the chief information officer, or also if they're lateral. And I just want to make sure I have that correct. I'm not sure I like it either way at this point, but I'm still trying to figure out whichever way this amendment goes. Do I want the investment funds committee putting this individual and deciding what level in the hierarchy and who has assumedly hiring and firing authority, right? If this is a chief executive officer, I would assume they could get rid of the chief investment officer, or they could do that only with the agreement of the state treasurer. I just keep struggling through this and would like perhaps both sides of how this would work with the amendment or without the amendment.
Thank you. Members for the first time, Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question on line 12 of the amendment. This part I circled was really, that goes into the budget bill, and because we're trying to hire this new position, right? Because we're, 6 months to 8 months behind on the accounting in the back office. There's a lot goes on in that office, but a big part of it is accounting, right? And there's billions of dollars being traded at stake every day to the wealth of this state. It's really an incredible blessing. But the part I guess I have concern with the amendment, but on this line 12 of the amendment where it goes to page 15, line 1, and it takes out State Loan and Investment Board shall select a candidate, and it goes to this, insert the state treasurer. And we're kind of going through this thing again. And I brought that little bill that failed by 1 vote, but this is bigger than that office. It's bigger than whether you're elected or appointed. All that stuff. And I just think this is such a huge, huge issue. And every state has brought this out where it's not politics, where we don't have a chance of a true black swan event, where something really, really bad happens. And it's all about stability for our current residents and our future residents. And so I think the biggest, I have a problem with the amendment, but this deal on line 12, where it's page 15, line 1, everything we've prescribed in law is a state loan and investment board. We don't let an elected or appointed treasurer decide all that stuff. We just don't. It's too much money. It's too much wealth. And every other state has done that as well. No state, our neighbors on all sides of us who have these funds, have allowed one person to kind of run that thing like that. We just don't. It's too much. It's too much at risk for any one person. So that's why we're here, to prescribe laws. So on and against. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? We're on first time. First time. First time, seeing none. Second time. Second time, Representative Bear, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to address a few of the things that I've heard here in this testimony. Earlier on the previous amendment, we heard an appropriator from House District 48 say that we're politicizing the issue. We're trying to get away from that in this budget bill. That's what we've put this in here for, is to get away from politicizing. And I just have to ask you, if we're worried about one politician, are we really improving it if we put the decision in the hands of 5 politicians? And for the same argument, I would bring up what was mentioned by the good chairman of appropriations, that really it's about where the chips fall if something goes wrong. And I know that amongst us politicians, oftentimes the blame game starts, and if we have it spread out amongst 5 of us, nobody's going to be able to accept responsibility. Someone needs to be responsible to the people of Wyoming about these investments. And so I think we're going the wrong direction when we try to spread the load out over 5 people. A comment was made that we need to have a qualified investment person. What is that? We've already had testimony that the experts make mistakes, but who decides who's qualified and who's not when it comes to managing these investments. I think that the bringer of this amendment brought a great point when he said that the elected person is responsible to the people, and they're going to have a lower risk tolerance than these investment people. We've heard over the last several days that we have a great team of investors. That's what we have. We have a great team of people. We're adding to that team right now by adding this position. So the intelligentsia, if you will, that's going to go into these investments should only get better. But when we select someone, this amendment allows for the selection by the treasurer of a group of people based on candidates that the board brings before him. So now, if there's an issue with a great investor that's brought forward as a candidate where their personality is not going to fit on the team, someone has to make a decision that even though they're a good investor, they're going to cause havoc with this great team that we already have. Putting that decision into the hands of the treasurer is wise. And I believe that we have to rely on the wisdom of the people of this state to select a good treasurer. We heard that this has been going on since 1972. And we've also heard what great investments we've made over the years. I agree with both those statements. Since 1972, we've been making great investments with the person who's been elected by the people of Wyoming in charge of that. So I think we're on the right track already. We do set the profile. This body sets the profile. So we still have our input. But the treasurer is selected by the people of Wyoming to make these decisions on exactly how that profile will be met. With that, I stand in support of this amendment and ask that you would think this through clearly and think about, I would also agree with the previous bringer of the previous amendment that we really shouldn't even be doing this in the budget bill. This should be a bill where we can answer some of these questions about the hiring and firing issues in a properly debated way. But since we're here, let's improve it. And I think this amendment does just that. And Mr. Speaker, this is an important decision. So rather than just a voice vote, I'd like to have a voice vote, rather than just the call. Thank you.
Any other member for their first time? Member for their, or second time, excuse me. We're on second time. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So folks, just going to the amendment itself, the problem is that by putting in this amendment, it eliminates the opportunity for a chief operating officer because there's two variables. The way the original amendment was constructed, you could have a CEO or this new position or chief operating as a new position. Well, they took that out and inserted chief investment officer. Well, we already have a chief investment officer, so that relegates it to a CEO, which means the CEO would theoretically serve above the chief investment officer. And that's a position that clearly has not been recommended by the IFC. So that's the structure. And have we been investing great since 1972? Absolutely not. In fact, it was just in the 2000s when we first had the opportunity, someone who now serves in the US Senate, who helped us broaden our investment portfolio into the worldwide markets. And only since then have we been slowly having decent returns. I can show you a chart that Wyoming, compared to all the other states that have these sovereign funds, is at the bottom of the list because we are still in an income-based investment market procedure. We're in the process of changing that. But we could have made 14% last year instead of 6% had we done this 10 years ago. Thank you.
Any other member for their second time? We're on second time, second reading, amendment number 3, House Bill 1. Second time, to the sponsor, Representative Gray.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I think the person earlier asked for recorded vote, or that was his intent. I'll go ahead and do that if I guess there's a ruling that he didn't say recorded vote. So I asked for recorded vote on this. You know, this is a real issue, and I think there's a lot of muddy in the waters on this. The way this would work is the IFC would decide which position they recommend, the CEO, the CFO, or the COO. And then the treasurer would select from that list of candidates. And that's really, when you think about the org chart and the way this process should go, that's appropriate. The IFC are, yes, the so-called experts, and that's fine. And they can make that recommendation. But the individual that is ultimately selected serves at the pleasure of the state treasurer. It doesn't make sense. I mean, if the argument that, well, that we should put this in the hands of the experts, it doesn't make sense then to put this in the hands of the SLIB, which are 4 other individuals who don't interact at all with our state investment profile and their day-to-day duties. That doesn't make any sense to me. And so what this does is it puts the positions within the office under the purview of the state treasurer. Now, the risk profile on the funds, the former speaker was talking about that. I think it is a lot of money. And so, yes, we've in statute changed it so that it's a broad-based group of people that makes that decision. That's really outside of this. This is about whether the state treasurer can hire and fire within their own office. And to take away that duty, I think the implications of that are huge. To put that in the budget, I think, is inappropriate. I think we should fix it. I think that, you know, you make these changes, the concept's still there, we're still creating the position, we're collaborating with the IFC, and the state treasurer wants to do that. That has not changed at all. In fact, he wanted to put in that other position, that CFO position. The CEO is another position that the IFC could recommend to give them even more powers to look at his office and to make some recommendations. So it's not one person selecting the asset allocation, managing the money, but I do think that being able to hire and fire within one's office, to take that away from the elected state treasurer, we really need to think about what that means, what the implications are to that. I think it's a big change. We've never done that before. And I ask for an aye vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. So members, there was a call for the ayes and noes. That's Rule 12-4. Representative Bear, would you like to second that motion?
Second.
Thank you very much. So there's a call for the ayes and noes. There's a second. So Chief Clerk, please call the roll on adoption of second reading Amendment Number 3, House Bill 1.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn excused. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller.
No.
Please repeat, Representative Obermuller.
No.
O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood.
No.
Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Sawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 27 aye, 32 no, 1 excused.
Second reading amendment number 3 has not been adopted. Next reading, amendment for consideration, number 4, Representative Gray.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry, we have several privileges of the floor. My apologies. Representative Haroldson, my apologies.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Privilege of the floor.
Please proceed.
So up in our north gallery, I've got a constituent from my home county and hometown. Cindy Guile owns and operates South Street Pharmacy in Platte County, and she's been doing that for quite a few years now. And she's a phenomenal asset to our community, and she's down here just getting to know the legislative process in regards to Senate File 36, and she's here speaking on its behalf. But just want to give her a round of applause.
Well, welcome. Glad you're here joining us. I want to introduce our nurse of the day, Rachel Settles with the Wyoming Nursing Board. Thank you for being here, Ms. Settles. All right, thank you very much. So members, we're at second reading, amendment number 4, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for favorable consideration for second reading amendment number 4 to House Bill 1. What this amendment deals with is the HR centralization that the A&I department is doing. So we're centralizing all these HR positions like we do with ETS. It's 80 some odd positions. And there's no direction on them achieving any reduction. The whole point of having a centralization, just like we try to do in other instances, and frankly, I don't think we're able to quite get there, is the whole point of achieving this centralization is to achieve scale. And once you achieve scale, then you should be able to effectuate a reduction. So we're centralizing all these HR positions, and as people retire, I'm not for firing anyone in this amendment. That's not what anyone does. Doesn't force anyone to quit. All it says is that as people retire up to 2 positions within HR, those positions should remain vacant. And it reduces the funding of to that like amount. And it's 2 positions of over 80. I think it's 84 positions. And as people retire through attrition, we should be able to reduce the footprint of the HR department. And that's the whole point of centralizing these positions. Otherwise, I don't know why on earth we're going through this exercise. And if we don't get it done now, it's going to be more and more difficult as time goes on. And this is one of the ways that I think we struggle. I mean, with ETS, there's ETS that provides the centralized services, and then a lot of these departments have IT positions, which negates the whole point of having a central hub. The whole point of that is to hopefully achieve efficiencies like the efficiency report that was issued said, through scale. So let's just put this into the budget. It's not a big deal. It just says if up to 2 people retire, then those positions will remain vacant and not be rehired so that we can achieve this reduction through the centralization of HR. Otherwise, I don't know why we're doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Kinner, first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I certainly agree with the bringer of the amendment that we want to achieve efficiencies, but let me remind you of the fact that this was just accomplished. And when we listened to all the appropriations of all the various agencies, we talked to them with how it's going. And so we do have a good feel for that. But ladies and gentlemen, I would urge caution here because this is a new endeavor and we kind of need to let the dust settle a little bit on that. And I think that they will find efficiencies over time. And so I would just encourage a no vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Simpson and then Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, when the department heads came to us in January and December, the question was posed before every single one of them. How is the HR situation going as they're transitioning into this? Almost all of them said it's going okay. We're adjusting accordingly. Some of them flinched when they said that. We had one department head said it's going horribly. I lost my HR person, and we're in a disaster every day without that resource close by. So we've had a varied response. I want to assure you that the Appropriations Committee wants efficiency, but the timing on this is not quite correct. Here's the deal. We're waiting for the director of A&I to tell us after the dust settles how many positions she can eliminate. But it's premature for us to sit here. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Have you approached HR people anywhere in this program and found out how swamped they are and if they're busy? Or I think it's inappropriate for us just to slash jobs just because we think we ought to, when in reality, we really ought to listen and pay attention to our department head and respond to what they're telling us. So I encourage a no vote on this amendment.
Thank you. Representative Bear, Representative Larson Lloyd.
First for a second, please, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? First time, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We talk about timing. We're hearing about timing from the appropriators, and this particular amendment does not affect the timing. All we have happening is the direction for the HR department that when someone steps down, we're not going to refill that. We're going to effectuate the very efficiency that they are striving to achieve. So the timing, I just don't believe it's an issue. When someone steps away, there's no better time to effectuate that change, where no one's job is hurt, no one's income is hurt. We are a compassionate body, and this is being compassionate. So I'm on and for the amendment.
Thank you. Representative Bear, first time. Oh, excuse me, Henderson, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the area of human resources is a critical area at this point in our state. I met with the director of this agency, and she's very generous with her time. And I wanted to understand what the impact on people are, because, you know, I think people are our most important resource right now. And I think we do unintentionally, I believe, a disservice if we get in the way of the good work of the agencies when they're scrambling to keep up. Everyone knows that we have a shortage in many areas. This agency put out a very good report on all the vacancies that we currently have that we're trying to get people to fill. And so if you think of a transmission, you know, this is one of our most important gears in the operation of our government. I say we resist this well-intentioned amendment at this time.
Thank you. Any other member, first time? We're on first time, amendment number 4. First time, first time, first time, second time, second time. Vice Chair Larson Lloyd.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so the concern I have is we listen to the agency in this HR consolidation. We find that they keep these HR positions basically housed in the same place they were. They just have a new boss, and they kind of adopt some new responsibilities as well. And so if you have, in the scope of the things, let's just say that you have an HR person at the state hospital that's under HR, but he performs that service there at the state hospital. He retires, or she, and that's the only one we have. We can't fill that with this. And so I see some unintended consequences depending on where that person is located and the number of people that are there. So if you had 1 or 2 people maybe up at the at one of the state facilities up in the basin that retired or quit, you would have to shift that HR responsibility and not have that hands-on that we currently have in place. So I too would exercise caution. In fact, I would encourage that we don't adopt this amendment.
Members, we're on second time to the amendment, second time. Any other members, second time? Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just would address the previous speaker that that's the responsibility of being efficient, is shifting people around. And that's what we do. That's what the private sector does, and we're trying to emulate somewhat what the private sector does. And I believe that this amendment accomplishes that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member for their second time? Second time to the sponsor, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is always fascinating going up against the appropriations committees on some of these things, trying to tease out reductions, because the circularity, it just becomes astounding. I mean, this isn't slashing anything. All it's saying is that as vacancies come up, to the tune of 5% of the total of the entire HR centralization. All we're saying, less than 5%, it's more like 4%, right? Because it's it's 84 positions. As two come up, we're asking them not to fill those. If they come up through retirements, someone leaving, it's not incentivizing that at all. It's just saying that they're not going to fill it. And if the agency, if this is micromanaging, if the agency is intending on filling those positions, I have to ask, I mean, what is the point of this? What are they going to achieve a reduction off centralization? And the example given by the representative from District 54 about, oh, it could be the person in charge of the state hospital. The whole point of the centralization is to have multiple people have those duties. So you're not relying on one person within an agency. And that's what allows, as these positions come up through attrition, that's what allows us to effectuate the reduction. So this is really just good process. And it's off the efficiency report that we commissioned, it was definitely six figures. I mean, I think it was probably under 500,000, but was definitely six figures. And they said, look, if you're gonna try to do these efficiencies, you gotta follow through. You gotta have the mettle to follow through and say, look, you should be able to achieve economies of scale once you achieve the centralization. And if we're not gonna have that kind of mettle, I think the exercise is largely futile, duplicative, and actually increases the size of government, because many of these agencies are going to try to retain these positions anyway. So I ask for an aye vote. Let's just get this moving a little bit. It's pretty low. It's not very heavy-handed. Let's just try to keep this going. Thank you.
Thank you. So members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 4, House Bill 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Amendment is not adopted. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. All those opposed? The vote is 24 to 35. The amendment has not been adopted. All right, we have a privilege of the floor. Representative Romero Martinez. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the floor. I want to draw everybody's attention this way. And joining us today is Sally Loya. She is a constituent in my district and survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault. You see, she has a crown on. She is Elite Miss Wyoming Petite. She will be in Wisconsin in August to compete for the Petite USA title. She is here to raise awareness about domestic violence and sexual assaults, and possibly also talk to you about her suggestions on how we can maybe tighten up the law. So if everyone can please give a round of applause to Sally Loya.
We're so pleased you're joining us today, and we congratulate you and wish you well on this journey you have before you. So thank you. Thank you for your work and advocacy. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand in recess until 1:30 p.m.
Thank you. Members, committee announcements. Committee announcements. Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, Education, will not be meeting at noon recess.
And the crowd goes wild. Chairman Nicholas.
We're comparing notes. Mr. Speaker, your House appropriations will meet at noon tomorrow to continue 166, 164, or 167.
67. Yeah, Senate File 67.
Senate File 67 and 66, and Senate File 2.
Chairman Harshman.
Mr. Speaker, your committee number 3 will meet tomorrow, Thursday, 2/24 at 9 a.m. I think that's in extension room 3 for House Bill 147.
I've heard that's a pretty important bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 8, Transportation, will meet tomorrow, Thursday, whatever Thursday is, to consider House Bill 44, House Bill 64, and if time permits, Senate File 1835 and 45, not necessarily in that order.
Thank you. Chairman Olson.
Your committee number 1, Judiciary, will meet tomorrow, Thursday, in room EEO1 to consider one bill, House Bill 85, and we will meet at 12:30.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Any other announcements? So members, I have an announcement. At our current rate, I don't know who picked tomorrow morning at 2 a.m., but that's what our estimated landing time is on third reading. We're running at about 20-some minutes per amendment. That means it takes about 18 hours to get through the amendments that we have before us. So I just want to give you that heads up. That's why you got a little longer or shorter lunch hour and committee time, so we can hopefully have that time for our amendments. So legislators, there is lunch in the break room for those that are either going to committee meetings or do not have committee meetings, want to work on their budget amendments. There is lunch in the break room. You don't have to go downstairs. Whoever provided it today was kind enough to bring it up for the legislators. So this was on behalf of probably community colleges and that, but I'll find out that for afterwards. But the lunch has been provided. It is in the break room. Any further announcements? Any further announcements? House, we are on recess. We will continue second reading on the budget bill at 1:30.